Dovolte, abych zahájil konferenci.
Allow me to open the conference on the future of European agriculture. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you at today's conference organized by Mr. David from the European Parliament on the future of agriculture and rural development. This is co-sponsored by the group Identity and Democracy of the European Parliament. And I would also like to take the opportunity to tell you that your queries and questions should be typed in and sent to us by internet. You have the connections here. sli.do, and the code is AGRI. This is for you to be able to vote and direct your questions to the speakers. And at this point, let me hand over to Dr. David. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the preparatory committee, I would like to thank all the speakers for willingness to share their knowledge and experience, and special thanks are due to our guests from abroad. I would also like to thank you all for showing your interest. It is appropriate to thank all those who have taken part in the preparations for the conference. Specifically, thanks are due to Mr. Martin Čermák, without whose effort this conference wouldn't have been able to take place, as well as Mr. František Jonáš, who has been helping in as much as his health condition allowed him to. I decided to organize this conference because it is not generally accepted that agriculture and rural areas are not a matter for farmers only, but they should be in the focus of interest of all the populations of the European states, if Europe should have a future. We have managed to be offered the auspices of the President, Mr. Miloš Zeman, and Minister of Agriculture, Miroslav Toman. Dr. Janusz Wojciechowski, the European Commissioner for Agriculture, has been invited to this conference too, but he had to apologize to be able to attend a conference on agriculture taking place in Brussels. The President of the Agrarian Chamber, Dr. Zdeněk Jandejsek, also apologized because he's having business outside Prague today. As a member of the Agriculture Committee, Agriculture and Rural Development Committee of the European Parliament, I soon realized that the Brussels administration and Parliament require more of the farmers than the farmers can render without creating conditions for them. Besides subsidies, farmers are faced with limitations and obstacles, and contracts are being concluded allowing the import of farm commodities from outside Europe at dumping prices without possibility to keep them in check. Agriculture and rural areas are facing numerous problems throughout Europe. Life in rural areas is seemingly less costly, but the citizens in rural areas have significantly lower incomes on average. The infrastructure in rural areas is less developed. and the investment funds are limited. To illustrate my point, let me mention two hearings organized recently by the Agriculture Committee of the European Parliament. The first was concerned with employment in agriculture. The room was half empty, and yet the rural populations are aging, and the incomes are at 42% of the European average. The purchasing power is lacking in the rural areas, which prevents the development of services. The rural areas are being depopulated. Thick proceedings was available with the statistical data and case studies from several countries. Nevertheless, there were very few proposals for solution. This hearing was followed by another one. That was concerned with the population of wolves in Europe. The room was totally full. Members of the Environment Committee of the Parliament were also present, which is by far the largest committee of the European Parliament. We heard that wolves were wonderful animals and that the populations are growing. Nevertheless, they still need to grow to safeguard genetical stability. In most European countries, they enjoy unlimited protection. In Tuscany, for example, they even ramble towns, and people have got used to them. The farmers should learn to coexist with wolves, even if they kill sheep. One of the German MEPs asked how large a wolf population should be to safeguard genetic stability, but he was told that no numbers are sufficient. The experts for carnivores were very self-assured, while the farmers were rather shy. Another German MEP complained that farmers are faced with hate from the other citizens. Last week I heard a talk show on the Czech television where an ornithologist was confronted with a farm expert, and it looked as if it were a court hearing, while the ornithologist was the prosecutor and the farm expert was the defendant. I'm quite convinced that we need a serious discussion on the real priority of farming. Tomorrow afternoon, farmers from the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland are going to a rally on the Rue de la Loi in Brussels, supporting a stronger budget for the common agricultural policy. But I'm afraid that the goal is not going to be attained. I do hope that this conference will contribute to the divulgation of information on the rational, critical discussion of the needs of agriculture. I do wish for fewer fanatics and more pragmatics, less demagoguery and more matter-of-fact points. I do hope you will find this conference useful. This is off the microphone. This cannot be interpreted. Please take your seat again and do not disturb. Thank you. At this point, I would like to invite our foreign guest, Mr. Anšpan, the Secretary of for Agriculture of EFFAT. Dobrý den. Budu hovořit anglicky, tedy vynasnažím se. To skvělá doba k návštěvě. Dostal jsem nějaké otázky, budu tedy...
Agricultural subsidies, and at the end on negotiations with Mercosur countries on agriculture. Thanks for the invitation. I'm representing the agricultural trade unions in Europe. I'm coming originally from Germany, one of the countries with these big wolf problems, as I heard. I don't think that there is any problem with wolves. We have now some hundred animals, and if they create a problem, they will be shooten. If they are not creating problems, then they will be protected. And if a sheep is killed by a wolf because the wolf is eating these animals, then the farmer gets subsidies, gets reimbursement from the government. And this is, in my understanding, the biggest problem with this question. It means, what are we expecting from governments? What are we expecting from Europe, from national governments? And most important thing is to integrate the rural area in Europe. Without an integration of the rural areas in questions of investments, infrastructures, access to new technologies, there will be a very, very hard future for these areas and for agriculture. With strong investments by national governments and European Union in infrastructure, access to new instruments, to new technologies, there will be a wonderful future. Because the people have to eat, and the people are growing, and that means they will consume more. But that doesn't help you on the level of a farm, because mostly the farmer don't know for what kind of market he's producing. He's producing products, but he's not controlling for what kind of markets he is producing his products. That means others take over the responsibility for the consumption of his products, for the trading of his products, for the defining of markets. As long as the farmer is not independent to decide what kind of products he wants to produce for what kind of markets, there will not be a good future. It doesn't matter if the global developments are going in the one direction, more people, more consumption, more prices and whatever. It is the question how the single company, how the single farm can participate in this game. And this is the central question we have to discuss, not the wolves. The wolves are not the problem. Not in Czech Republic, not in Germany, not in countries where the wolves are living since 100 years, like Italy, Spain, and so on. They have a wonderful experience with these questions. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm representing EFFAT, which is a European trade union with 130 national trade unions in 37 European countries. That means we are not only representing trade unions from European Europe, but from Europe. And it's very important to understand this difference. And our Czech member is the OSPZV, and I'm from ASO, and I'm very happy to be here. So the biggest problem is the role of the farm, the role of the farmers, the role of agricultural workers. What kind of possibilities they have individually to define what they are producing for what kind of markets. And it is very clear, the consumption is growing. That means the future is wonderful. If everyone has the right and the possibility to access to these markets. It is very important to see that we are today living in a world which is different to the world 20, 30 years ago, where everyone in this room had familiar relations to farms. 30 years ago, everyone in this room had a part of his family who was related to a farm. And today the discussion is majorized by people who don't have any relations to agriculture and farms. That means they don't understand our problems. And it is a question who will communicate with this new society, with these new people who are speaking about wolves and animal welfare, and they see every hen and every cow like the dog or the cat they have in their houses. And that creates problems. So the question is, who is taking care of the communication with this changing society? If we, from agriculture, also in future say this is not our world, that's the world of the urbans, of the towns, and of people who don't know about the reality, there will be no communication because they have their own reality and they have the same right to be accepted by their reality. We have to understand them, and it's not the way that they have to understand us. Because we are not longer the majority. We are a minority. Every statistic say very easy and very clear that our world is not the normal world. So that creates a lot of possibilities. That creates a new kinds of changes and new kinds of possibilities, solutions, because we have really to give them a kind of event. It should be wonderful to consume national products for national consumers. It should be more worth for every consumer to participate in the consumption of national local production. It should be an event to use this possibility to get access from the consumer side to our products. And the Czech Republic has a wonderful and a lot of very positive examples for these new relations in the markets. If you speak about Czech beer, then everyone is proud to participate from this product. Everyone wants to consume this national product, this beer from Czech Republic and not beer from abroad. And why is it not possible to take over the solution from the beer market to milk market, to cheese, to all these big anonymous markets? We are producing anonymous products for it. Grain, as an example. There is no certificate. There is no kind of identification from the consumer side to understand what kind of product he is consuming. So we are expecting from governments to give investments in independent advisory services for farmers, for farms, how they can participate in these changing markets. And if, as more advice, as more independent advice we get, as more we can survive our problems, as more we can develop our rural areas, and then on the other side, the politics are also interested to invest in rural areas and agriculture. Next point is the digitization. which can give us a lot of good developments for our future. The question is, first, do we get access to these new technologies? And what is the outcome of the access to these technologies? Who is the winner and who will be the loser of this development? What does it change for farmers, for workers, for family workers, and so on? And therefore, we believe that education, skills, access to advice services, access to education is the key factor for the question, does agriculture have a future? Without focusing on this point, which means a lot of investments in infrastructures, in technology, in access to fast internet and so on, without getting a public support for this participation, the future will be hard. Also on the level of the individual farm, which is not responsible for creating this access to new instruments. So open questions are the questions how we are in the next part. Yes, here is something I have to. Yes, here we are. So the question is, how can we defend the European agricultural model? And the question, should we defend this European agricultural model? And the European agricultural model, in one sentence, is very easy. It's a defending of small and medium-sized enterprises, farms, versus large farms. Doesn't mean what it means, large farms. Czech Republic, with this structure, of course, has in European average large farms. That doesn't mean that these farms are large farms at the level of international competition. Next point is a question, how can we develop agriculture to a more safe sector? Agriculture is the most dangerous workplace of all sectors in Europe. And it is a central question for us to give for this question the answer. Can we make the sector more safe? Because that also depends on who is following the actors, the stakeholders in the sector. Without finding a question on this important point, it will be very hard to get access to good educated workers, for young farmers who take over the responsibility for farms. Next point is not the question, is there the climate change or not? The answer is still on the table since 10 years. The question is how we can work with the changement in this climate change, because the politics are developing the instruments. International, European and national legal basics are changed now, or are still in change. And the question is how we can participate from this development. Same question with digitization. Big question is the image. And the question at last, who are the people, who are the actors leading agriculture in the future? I should speak about standards and food safety. There's one thing which is very clear. You can complain or whatever you can do. You can always say I'm against it or whatever. But the standards and the certificates, means the labels, will increase. New standards will also increase. That means others take over the money, certification bodies and whatever, and you have to work for them. You can complain. You can always say it's unfair or whatever, but this is going on. From China, from Brazil, from Canada, but also to the Czech Republic. And if you are losing time by complaining about this development, if you are losing time by trying to create alternatives against this global development, then you are on a poor way because you are not able, you don't have the instruments to go out of this way. So that's more the question, how can you use these developments? And I'm sure you have a lot of wonderful, educated people in Czech agriculture who participate in this way. If you analyze the wine market of the Czech Republic, you can see that the integration of using the standards on a very positive and open way gives this sector more economic and social possibilities than it had before. 3 minutes. Thank you very much. So these standards act as well as motors, as well as brakes for certain markets. Same is the question with new technologies. They need a lot of substantial investments, and they are not very often suitable for different markets. So it's also a question of image. Should you produce under new technologies, as an example by genetic modified engineering, or not? Also there, your possibilities are very, very limited. It's also limited on the level of a member state, also on national level, because the legal basics, the legal developments are made on European level. You can accept it, you can defend it, you can fight against it, whatever, but it doesn't change the reality. Unequal treatment on Eastern European countries. 2 minutes. Let us say very easy, there are no unequal treatments. There are only different effects of the same instruments. If you look to the common agricultural policy subsidies, the direct payments, you see that they are always linked with the national income of every member state. And if you say it is unfair that Western Europe has different effects to the Czech Republic, please make an analysis between Czech Republic and the Romanian Republic. So it's not a fight against West, against East. It's a fight of economic participation of the state where you are as member state and how you can develop your future. And one thing very clear, the Czech Republic is very, very, on a very positive way if you look to your other countries in the region. So you are not on the wrong way. So the development, the participation, the growth, and the participation in economic development is very, very clear. Last point, and one sentence to the Mercosur, and the last sentence. There are winners and losers in international trade agreements, and it's the politics who decide who are the winners and who are the losers. Agriculture is not seen as an important economic sector. So the politics use agriculture for getting solutions for other sectors, industry, services, and so on. It is a reality. And we are against this kind of agreements because we see that we don't get any development, especially for workers. That means the Latin American countries are not willing to develop the rights and the position of workers in agriculture, but they will get a better access to our market. And we say, without a development for workers' participation rights and free, independent, democratic, and based on solidarity relations between the countries, there will be no need for this kind of agreements. Thank you very much.
Ďakujeme pánu Arnovi Španovi a teraz by som poprosila tajomníka.
Well, let's thank Mr. Armstrong and now Mr. Dolezal. the Secretary of the Agrarian Chamber of the Czech Republic. Good morning. For today, I have prepared a short presentation. You'll see that on the screen. It's in English, but I'm going to speak in my native language in Czech, because in English my slides make more sense, because I've prepared a presentation which is called the ABC of Common Agricultural Policy. So let's start with A, letter A. From our view, the Agrarian Chamber, we would welcome the possibility to have reforms of agricultural policy in decreasing the administrative burden, which today is a great problem, not only for farmers in the Czech Republic. The Minister Toman often speaks about the fact that farmers should spend more time in the field and in the stable, not at the computer. Unfortunately, the administrative burden is very, very high, and some farms even have to hire special people who is employed just because to cope with the administrative burden. And smaller companies, without this possibility, the smaller farmers have much bigger problems with administrative burden. That's why we say that the reform of the Common Agricultural Policy after 2020 should bring a simplification, not only on the paper. Perhaps you remember that each and every reform which we've met since our accession to the EU, we were promised that there will be a simplification of administration, that rules will be more simple, and that thick book containing all the legislation, rules and regulations and requirements which the Ministry of Agriculture wants from you, that volume is increasing. So this is not only A, the first letter of the alphabet, but also something that makes the life of a farmer easier. I have given a couple of examples how to achieve that. One of these examples is smart systems, distant viewing, distance sensing, advisory service. And that's important because farmers will be required after 2020 still more volume of work, and if they want to achieve better results, even in protecting the environment and resources, it's necessary to have good advisory services. Of course, we have a technology of precise agriculture which could help farmers to cope with higher demands. My example is smart subsidies, claim farms, which could help in application for subsidies, and that could be a way we should opt for. We have the new delivery mechanism that must be implemented in a way which brings real simplification, and member states should create their own agricultural policy based on their own ideas and based their own local conditions. Nevertheless, the new mechanism must be implemented in such a way that brings real simplification, so that we were not drowned in paperwork. Getting to letter B of our alphabet, well, budget, and if the European Union wants more from farmers based on the proposal of the European Commission, It seems, based on different initiatives like new Green Deal, which was brought about with the new Vice President of the European Commission, then it will be necessary to support farmers adequately, because today not always is the support adequate, because your financial costs are increasingly going up. I was speaking about protecting resources, natural resources, and other requests, how to protect environment, and if the farmer should make ends meet. In the long run, the buyout prices are stagnating or even deteriorating, and it's necessary to support farmers in an adequate manner. We are speaking about 38% out of the budget of the European Union, but if we look at the figure from another angle, it means 0.38% of GDP of the overall European Union. And if we speak about giving 2% of GDP for defense, well, that's something which should be allocated for agriculture. And it's negligible figure, that 38%, because everyone's got to eat. That's the prerequisite. And yet another thing, European agriculture must be competitive. We have trade agreement so that we could export cars, so we have Mercosur agreement. On the other hand, we have great competitiveness within the EU, which means that we are pressuring the tariffs, and that endangers competitiveness and viability of farmers. We have markets with GMOs, and we have preparations for protection of plants, and that is an important and increasing trend. And our farmers have portfolio rather small to protect their plants, and their competition outside the EU could choose from a much wider portfolio of protective measures. And glyphosate, using glyphosate is something which we have to consider. We will start diminishing usage after 2020, which means that this is yet another competitive disadvantage of EU capping. If we speak about capping, it should be a balanced support of the overall agricultural sector. This is yet another priority which we as the Agrarian Chamber are promoting, so that there was no capping. For member states, it would be voluntary, and each member state is having a different structure of agricultural structure. In the Czech Republic, there are companies which, by capping from 2018, these are companies which are operating majority of agriculture, and that makes us sustainable and makes it possible for us to produce our own foodstuffs. And from the sustainability point of view, it is necessary to have enough biomass so that the soil in the Czech Republic was in good condition and it was fertile. And that's why, for member states, we should have high flexibility so that they were able to choose. And we're happy that the Czech Republic is promoting the fact that, in case of capping, we would opt for the variant of redistributive support. It means that small farmers, which we have in the Czech Republic, these small farmers would be more subsidized, and at the same time larger companies, which are enough, so that their support wouldn't be diminished.
Dalším písmenem v abecedě.
The next letter in my alphabet is D, D for direct payments. And of course, at this point, we should discuss what the structure should be to avoid a revolutionary change. As you know, today we are used to payment per area, if I should put it simple. It's the so-called basic support, BISS, Basic Income Support for Sustainability, with which we should be able to face dropping prices and the demands of environmental protection. In our opinion, this should make at least 40% of the whole envelope. 60 if possible. 20%, in our opinion, should belong to support related to production, so-called sensitive commodities such as potatoes, hops, fruits, vegetables, and highly demanding animal husbandry. We see this as very important because since 2004, unlike the older member states, we have been applying payments per area. But unfortunately, that directed some farmers toward focusing on just a few profitable crops, such as wheat or rapeseed, avoiding more demanding produce such as potatoes or hops, which is why we see the importance of this envelope as sensitive and important, and therefore 20% should be the target. We believe, as for the eco schemes, we believe these should be tailored to specific regions and preferably targeted at farm level. Because if you figure out a farm of 20 hectares, and if you should extrapolate this to the entire country, then of course you would be in little agreement with the real condition throughout the country in terms of commodities, in terms of biodiversity. So the policy should be linked to the entire system to react to the specific needs of a farm. And the last point, crisis reserve, which is a part of the whole envelope, the whole CAP envelope. If we face a problem such as we did on the milk market in 2016, we should be able to reach into this envelope without reducing other kinds of support. Another important question is E for external convergence. That translates into a kind of the just balancing of payments to the eastern and the western parts of the Union. We should achieve a real balance by 2030. At the beginning, we were only given 25% of what we claimed, and we were promised that over time the payments would be balanced out between individual member states, especially in terms of land price and labor cost. Labor costs are quite similar between the western and eastern parts of the Union. If you take a look at the price of land, land is in fact costlier now in the Czech Republic than in France. Therefore, the support should indeed be based on the real situation without basing it on 2004 figures. Now I'm getting to F for flexibility and fragmentation, which in fact means that the member states should enjoy a greater freedom in the selection of instruments within the Union. Higher flexibility at the same time should not result in fragmentation. We should not end up with 27 or 28 farm policies, depending on the outcome of the UK election this week. It should be more targeted on individual regions, while maintaining a united market which should enjoy equitable conditions. And this should function also for the farmers who want to import to the European Union, for example, from South America, that relates to Mercosur, or from North America, that is CETA. The Czech Republic should be able to support, for example, export of cars to the Americas, and at the same time, agriculture should not be left out of these agreements. Otherwise, such agreements will threaten the welfare of the farmers. Now we are getting to G for genuine farmer, or active farmer if you want. This is also quite a big theme in the Czech Republic. You may remember times around 2006 when support of the diversification of incomes of farms, some of them enjoying business of agritourism or construction industry or transportation, yet most farms live predominantly on farming, and it was quite a complicated matter to solve it, and it wasn't really worthwhile at that time. Omnibus has decided that the active approach should be voluntary. We welcome this in the Czech Republic. We do not require that very strictly anymore of the farmers. Still have the small-time farmers in this country with somewhat more complicated access to market, and these many of these have decided to diversify their incomes. All told, we believe that this approach to active farmers is somewhat too complicated administratively. I'm getting to the end of my presentation. Age for happy holidays. Merry Christmas. And we have a new European Commission, quite a fresh one. We have a new parliament. We've had it for half a year now. And these new institutions should bring about new ways of thinking. And if we believe we find ourselves in a transitional period, then maybe this Christmas time and this transitory period, which should take 1 or 2 years, we should take advantage of this period to contemplate this host of questions which seem to be unanswered yet. With the ongoing debates, including the debates in the European Parliament, so we should be trying to find answers to these questions. Let me thank you for your attention, and let me wish the best to Czech agriculture and to our farmers and to our citizens, so that they're always able to find good Czech products on the market. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Doležal. Before I announce the next speaker, I would like to tell those who were not here at the beginning that you can ask your questions using these ways, as I'm showing on the screen. Now I would like to ask the next speaker, Professor Smutka from the Agricultural College in Prague. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am very glad to be able to take part in this conference and tell you about the problems of human resources in agriculture in a broader sense of the word. I should talk about the use of human resources in the global context. Then I should talk about human resources in European agriculture and some positive or negative trends relating to human resources, mainly in relation to productivity, as well as the existing differences between individual member states. When we talk about the utilization of human resources in European agriculture or agriculture worldwide, we should contemplate these problems in a broader context, the context of dynamic growth of population worldwide, as we have been witnessing since the onset of the Industrial Revolution until the day. We have witnessed the massive growth of worldwide population during the last, say, 130 years, from 1.5 billion individuals to today's 7.8 billion people. Of this, about 1/3, that is something like 3 billion people, live in rural areas, have strong relations to the rural areas, and more than 1 billion of these people worldwide directly work in agriculture. there are some formidable differences between individual regions of the world in terms of the development of the rural population. So, let's see it in this context of development between 1990 and 2015. Note the development of economically active population. The numbers of people economically active in agriculture on the global scale have grown by approximately 200 million. Nevertheless, this mainly applies to the developing countries. If we take the advanced countries, such as the member states of the European Union, the farming populations tend to dwindle continuously. The number of people economically active in agriculture has dropped by about 10 million to something like 9.3 million in 2015, and this seems to be quite a stable, regular trend. North America shows quite an interesting trend where less than 3 million individuals are involved in agriculture of a total population of the US and Canada of nearly 400 million. As for the distribution of economically active population worldwide, this also translates into the distribution of farms. Most farms are located in the developing countries. While in the advanced countries there are only about 4% individual farms of the world. Here we can see how farms are diversified in terms of size. There are about 500 million farms worldwide, of which about 70% are smaller than 1 hectare. 10% are of about 5 hectares, and farms above 10 hectares only make about 3% of the total population of farms, so to speak, the total number of farms. So if we should talk about this problem of size and equipment, it is not just a Czech problem. It's one that we can see in a large number of countries, and it is a phenomenon that affects agriculture across all the continents, in fact. And if we take a look at the dwindling population involved in agriculture, this is a general trend that we can see throughout the world, not just in the Czech Republic, not just in the European Union. You can see in the last 30 years we have witnessed a radical reduction of the population directly involved in agriculture. And in the European Union, this trend has been much the same. And if we relate this to the Czech Republic, in relation to the EU trend, we can see a very similar trend. It correlates very well with the global average or the European average.
It means that in the Czech Republic, from the viewpoint of trends, nothing unusual is happening. It's everything you can see across the global economy. But what is interesting is to look at differences which exist from this angle at the level of individual member states. EU works within the common market and CAP, but a CAP in its concept is trying to find a compromise concerning finding a solution for very difficult problems. We have 28 states in the EU, and they are very much different. There are differences in terms of the role and position of agriculture within the national economy. And of course, in each state, it's different from the viewpoint of employment ratio. In each country, there are differences, primarily due to reduction of the agrarian sector and substitution of labor by capital. It means by massive subsidies into agriculture. And that's obvious in member states of the EU. In the past 20-30 years, they've transformed their agriculture, and farm entities prevail, with the average size 20-25 hectares per farm. And in countries with smaller farms, the proportion of people employed in agriculture is much higher, between 5 to 20%. What's again specific from the viewpoint of distribution of human resources is also a gender issue. Of course, that the proportion of males is double to that of females working in agricultural sector. From the viewpoint of this gender issue, there are not big differences between individual member countries. Speaking about the Czech Republic, we can see that the development from the viewpoint of economically active men and women in agriculture more or less corresponds with the development at the level of the EU, both male and female population. Of course, what's also specific in the Union agriculture as such, vis-à-vis to global agriculture, is a specific dual character. What you can see is that European agriculture, from the viewpoint of involving economically active population into agriculture, the gist of population is localized in smaller farms. It means farms roughly up to 20 hectares. Contrary to that, farms above 20 or respectively 100 hectares, there is a substantial reduction of employees in agricultural sector, and especially in farms above 100 hectares, employees are substituted by outsourcing, which is an important phenomenon. In terms of age structure, of course the situation is very specific. From the viewpoint of the age of managers or owners of farms, higher age category prevails. But it is necessary to realize one fact. Worldwide population is aging, and the European population is aging very dynamically. If we look at the age median of states of the EU, the average age is over 40 years. In the Czech Republic, the median ranges around 42 years of age. It means if we are discussing the fact that farmers are getting old and the proportion of younger farmers is diminishing, it's in a way a natural trend, and it's difficult to work with it because it's, as I said, natural. If you look at the EU economy, and if you look at the average age of working population, you'll find out that there was a shift by 10 years, and it's to be expected that it will grow, and that is important to realize. Of course, from the viewpoint of distribution across farms, you can see that related to their size. The smaller the farm, the higher the age of the manager. And contrary to that, with large farms which are managed by professional management, paradoxically, the average age is diminishing. A specific feature of the EU agriculture is increasing participation of women in role of farm managers. In the past 10 years, the proportion increased from 26% to 29%. And from this viewpoint, we can expect that in the future, on management positions, there will be more and more women. In terms of young farmers and their role, you can see the age structure of the EU farmers. Less than 35 years represent a very small column. What's important is that it is extremely difficult to bring young people into agriculture because for them it's not a classical business, for them it's not a good source of income, but you have to consider that this is a lifestyle, especially working with farm animals. You need to work 365 days in a year, night and day. And that's why agriculture becomes less and less attractive for younger people. However, there is an increase of new attractive technologies which make agriculture more and more attractive for younger people. It's in the area of substitution of the agriculture by capital, because the perception of agriculture as a hard toil is changing in favor of more attractive jobs for younger people. What's crucial is that we need to bring people with experience, people with agricultural education. And this, at the level of the EU, is a big problem. Because if you look at that, both in population up to 30 and population above 50, the core of employees are people with just basic education or people just with a practical experience. The full-fledged agrarian education is in those who are 35 years old only 20%, and those over 50, the figure is only 5%. However, young people coming to the sector are experienced, are educated, and they could cause the shift into yet another dimension from 3.0 to agricultural 4.0. But what needs emphasizing is that the proportion of people in agriculture has a tendency of massive reduction. The question is, what shall we do in the future? Because we'll be missing people for seasonal jobs. We are discussing the role of migrants who might do that manual, unqualified jobs. We know that some segments are really depending on migrants. So my time is nearly out. My presentation was a bit longer, but I wanted to show you one phenomenon which is important, and it's related to a labor force, showing disparity in wages and salaries in agriculture, which makes agriculture less attractive for younger people. What you can see is that if you look at wages and salaries, on average, there is a huge gap. We're able to compensate the gap thanks to the CAP, which is bringing new resources into the agriculture. It means that the scissors between the average wages in the national economy and agriculture are not opening up that dynamically. Nevertheless, from the average of the EU, the gap is there, and unless we eliminate this gap, young people will be not willing to come into the agricultural sector. So, this is the end of my presentation because my time's up. Let me thank you for the attention and possible questions and the economic interpretation of some coefficients I presented. You'll find in my presentation, which will be available, so we'll be able to compare differences between individual countries of the EU from the viewpoint of labor productivity. Thank you for the attention. Well, like to thank Professor Smotka and now the Deputy for Managing EU and International Relations, Mr. Jiří Šír. So again, the Deputy Director of the EU Section on Foreign Relations at the Ministry of Agriculture of the Czech Republic. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to follow up on my four speakers' presentations. At the moment, we are in a crucial moment on negotiations on the common agricultural policy, which is an important issue, and that accompanies the European Union for more than 50 years. And at present, from the viewpoint of budgeting, is the greatest proportion from the EU budget. There are lots of rules and regulations, and right now, in the past year and a half, these regulations are part of intense debate. So I'm going to inform you about some of these rules and regulations in the European Parliament. This is the content of my presentation, and later I can answer the question, and I think the Minister Toman will arrive in no time. I would like to remind you goals of the EU in the area of agriculture. They are anchored in the very agreement about functioning of the EU. One of the most important documents, Article 39, paragraph 1, the aim of the CAP is, among others, to increase productivity, to support technical development, rational development of agriculture, optimum use of production factors, especially labor force. At the same time, we need to provide adequate living standard of agricultural population by increasing individual wages and salaries of people employed in agriculture. See, we need to stabilize markets. After all, we've lived through milk crisis, there is a drop of sugar prices, and sector of pork meat is in troubles, and factors causing it are different, and at the minimum they are at the European or a global level. We have to provide a smooth supply of foodstuffs. After World War II, when the CAP was established, there was famine at the European continent, and there were food vouchers. This was something my grandma told me. I've never lived through times like that. And it's worth reminding us why agriculture is so important, because what's abundant and what's cheap, we tend to take it for granted. And last but not least, we need to provide to consumers supplies for reasonable prices. I think foodstuffs are at the lowest level in history. The very goals of CAP are described in 3 regulations. The point is the regulation of the European Parliament and the Council, and it stipulates all basic conditions and frameworks. It states common goals like support of diversified agriculture. Number 2, the environment protection should be more intense. And number 3, strengthening of social and economic structure in rural areas. All 3 topics were discussed by my 4 speakers, and I believe they are very topical. They are very specific goals, and you can see them in my presentation in Article 6 of the directive and We need to support young people. We speak about sustainable development, about the climate and competitiveness. So what is it like? There are 3 degrees about strategic planning, which will replace the direct payments, monitoring and funding and managing CAP, and changing the very area of agriculture markets with agriculture produced. The policy should be more ambitious in using instruments, taking care about environment. It should be more flexible, giving member states more authorities, and we as member states are obliged to define each measure as to how it will work and what will the goals be like, and we'll have to monitor whether they were fulfilled.
Agriculture should be intelligent, should take advantage of modern technology, to reduce bureaucracies and to be efficient. It should permanently focus on the market, react to market signals and adapt. Member states in their strategic plans should modify their national farming policies, respecting their specific national factors agreed on with the European Commission. We believe the budget should be kept at least at today's level. Here are some examples of impacts on the Czech agriculture, where we try to defend the interests of Czech agriculture. The effects should be the same for all member states. Or at least comparable. This example specifically relates to direct payments. We have an average farm approximately 10 times as large as the average throughout the European Union. Now, if I should tell you about the progress of the negotiations, the ministers meet on a monthly basis, except for August, to discuss the matters of common agricultural policy. I happen to be the speaker for the Czech Republic on the committee. The financial framework, the present financial framework applies to the years 2020 to 2027, which is not quite in agreement with the overall long-term goals. We expect the agreement on the next framework by summertime next year. Finland has tabled some proposals which should be discussed by the ministers next week in Brussels. The Czech Republic has been promoting the establishment of a proposal for the transitory period. The shortest viable duration is 2 years. The European Commission has proposed a 1-year transitional period, but we disagree and propose a longer transitional period. The Czech Republic is chairing the Visegrad Group at present. The ministers met last week together with the ministers of Slovenia, Bulgaria, and Romania, and the Finnish minister representing the presidency of the European Council is also taking part. Here I present, by way of illustration, the positions of member states, for example, concerning the ceilings. 10 member states advocate the ceilings. Some would like to have it voluntary. Some member states are undecided yet. When it relates to small farms, again, there is a diversity of opinions, so you can see how complicated these talks are. So some points are still left to be agreed on in the next few months. In April this year, the Environmental Committee and the Rural Development Committee adopted the proposals. The Commission has not given its consent yet, but the proposals are the basis for talks in the European Parliament concerning the proposals. The European elections have changed the composition of the European Parliament a lot. We are very glad we have a representative on the Agriculture Committee in the Parliament, something we couldn't really hope for. Nevertheless, many members of the committee are not farm experts. So we are regularly talking with the MEPs, not just Czech MEPs, and with the rapporteurs. It seems that the European Parliament is going to return to these proposals, amend them, and voting should take place during next year. So-called trilogues with the European Commission are going on. What I should say is that sometimes I meet with failure on the part of the European Parliament to understand the proposals of individual MEPs or individual political groups. The focus should not be just on small farms, because medium and large-sized farms are also well represented throughout Europe. So it is only just that the European Commission also mentions them in its proposal. The subsidy or the impacts of subsidy costs on the European budget have to be taken into account. The envisaged development we are glad to have a new European Commission. As from the beginning of this month, the so-called Green Agreement is on the table with stress on environmental factors. This is going to touch upon the European agriculture quite a lot. The Commission is going to table its proposal this today. The next outcome of the talks should give orientation to the further development of the negotiations. We would like to have a simple CAP and non-discriminatory one with strong financial backing and flexible for all the member states. In conclusion, the strategy of the talks. Here you can see some main points. We are very active among the European member countries. We are promoting our national interests. We cooperate with the various farming organizations in the country. The next meeting of ministers is going to take, of the Visegrad Group is going to take place next month in Brno. Where we consult further talks with the European Commission. So much for my presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Scheer. And now I should welcome Minister Toman. So we are eager to hear his message. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to be here. I apologize for my delay. I also apologize for having to leave early. And let me thank the organizers of this meeting. I believe Mr. Scheer and the previous speakers have told you about the common agriculture policy. You've heard a lot, so I'll cut my presentation short. I would like to say that in relation to the climatic change, the entire view of agricultural policy in society at large is changing in terms of the protection of the essential resources such as water, as well as biodiversity. As Mr. Scheer told you, we advocate a strong budget. If farmers should take greater care of the landscape, they should be endowed with funding. They need time to work and not waste it on bureaucracies. It is appropriate, I believe, to mention one condition, one critical factor, and that is the farmer as such. Why am I saying this? The European Commission requires every farmer to keep proving he is a farmer indeed. We have found this not quite functional. This has been abolished, and now it is much to my surprise that we find that this is going to be required again, and even in stricter terms than before. As I see the producers of hops as well as animal husbandry in this room, I feel a little ashamed for this. We insist on the maintenance of the support for all the sectors involved. We also advocate the payment for the first few hectares in order to offer support to small farms. It is not too important what size criterion should be adopted, but there should be one. Climate changes have been mentioned. Definitely we do need to adjust our methods of farming in order to keep water in the landscape and at the same time manage the disposal of water from fields to avoid erosion. We are going to talk about this with the farmers and with all those interested. We need to prevent soil erosion. We need to keep organic matter in the soil. And I cannot fail to...
Od letošního ledna jsme jako jeden z prvních států Evropské unie zakázali předsklizňovou aplikaci na plodiny.
I can't fail to mention glyphosate. Let me mention that the consumption of glyphosate dropped 25% in 2018. The consumption of pesticides dropped more than 14% in the last 6 years. Only Denmark consumes less pesticides than the Czech Republic, while in Germany the consumption is up to twice as much as here. So far, we have reviewed land use schemes in the country. We have invested 2 billion crowns, and we are going to focus on further measures to take. This is intimately related with water management, the amendment to the Water Management Act, which should accelerate the development of facilities, including protective dikes. We plan to improve more than 1,200 ponds, which is about a pond a day in the time frame. This is quite a serious step, so we had legal experts to draft an opinion of the bill. It is one of our important goals that water resource protection should be included in our constitution. There's general agreement throughout the political spectrum on this, so I do hope this effort is going to be successful. Forest is very important in this context, though we face an unusually strong bark beetle calamity, which is why we have adopted a number of measures to protect forests, to help the owners of the forest to revitalize the forests. The Czech Forest Administration has amended its strategy for the period till 2024. We have introduced some preparatory trees, species of preparatory trees for the revival of bark beetle-stricken forest areas. We have released another 350 million crowns for this effort, and an additional 1 billion for next year. Protection against wild boar is also important. What I promised in Parliament at the adoption of the Forestry Act should be made true. We are going to finalize the drafting by early next year. And I expect the amended law will be enacted in the next year. We cannot fail to mention foodstuffs. It is totally illogical to import foodstuffs that we can easily produce ourselves in terms of milk and dairy products, for example. We are able to export cheese, for example. Our capacities are quite sufficient. It is indeed useless to import, for example, low-fat Edam cheese. Czech foodstuffs are high quality and safe, and they rank 24 among 134 countries. And our inspection organizations work quite hard and quite efficiently and successfully in this respect.
Just in the last year, 17% only failed in inspection from the EU, more than 26% imported from third countries, and in the Czech Republic only 10%. In terms of double quality of foodstuffs, that is important, and I highlighted the fact that this is not the problem of Czech producers. It's a problem of above-national companies who are sure that Czech consumer wouldn't recognize quality. Otherwise, it's impossible to explain why people would force on us double quality of foodstuffs. We were pointing that out. The Ministry of Agriculture, our chambers pointed out to this problem, and there is a directive, and we'll pay attention to that in the years to come as well. Ladies and gentlemen, even if agriculture is among traditional sectors, its future without digitalization is hard to imagine. So in the CAP, we are trying to be digitalized. It's necessary to adjust technologies. We are supporting R&D, and in terms of modernization of equipment, farmers can draw from the program of rural development. Maximum subsidy is 90 million crowns, and 40 to 60% is paid by the farmer himself. Based on statistics into robotization and digitalizations, each fifth farmer is investing into that. Digital technologies are making lots of technologies much more simple. Using drones, they can monitor field work. Some drones could do multispectral sensing, so farmers can analyze the situation in the soil and they can dose the fertilizers. And they can, of course, monitor pests, etc. Digitalization of agriculture also improves the welfare of agricultural animals. And thanks to the fact that we would save doses of fertilizers, we are decreasing the burden on the environment, and the automation or robotization helps us to save the labor because we are lacking labor in agriculture. Technologies are making our lives easier. They are helping us, but I believe that even in the future, agriculture will be about a farmer who is walking around his fields, having a strong relation to his soil and to his animals. And we believe we can help farmers and that the CAP will accept our requests. And I wish you and us to negotiate conditions which will safeguard good development of Czech agriculture for the future. Thank you. Well, let's thank the Minister, Mr. Toman. And now questions you have posted. The question for Minister Toman: is it possible to count upon increasing the number of cattle? What would you think the maximum count of cattle would be for 1 hectare? Well, in increasing the number of animals, we were just discussing the support, the Title 8F and 20, and we are trying to have a sustainable number of cattle. In terms of ideal situation of units of cattle, well, people are protesting against 0.3 units. Some people are protesting against 1 unit. It really depends on the area. At the moment, I wouldn't like to see an increase of cattle. We would like to see more cattle, but we would have to have a sustainable number so that we could help farmers with subsidies. And we cannot forget about supporting 13+2 from direct payments, and we'll try to increase it, which is in a way a support of agricultural production. So we want to increase it, but not to such extent that farmers wouldn't cope with it. So I wouldn't make it more stringent. Next question is for you as well. How would you like to fight with the bark beetle calamity when there is a lack of people who would be interested in buying out damaged wood? I do not want to go back to the past. We have supported non-governmental owners, and the forests of the Czech Republic are not getting a single crown from the government. They have to cope by themselves. And the company, Lesy České republiky, the forests of the Czech Republic, they have stored 1 million cubic meters of wood not to oversaturate the market. And we would like to support them with payments for reforestation. I've been doing that for 17, 18 years, and I believe that next year we still will not have figures from this year, but we would like to help forest owners. We are trying to find people who would buy out damaged wood, because that was a situation in the whole Europe. I do not want to speak about China, but we need to be able to process that bark beetle damaged wood in the Czech Republic. We want to change decrees and rules so that even the woods or woods that have a much larger diameter, and we expect the support to be increased, and we extended so-called red zones in buying out a construction use woods, and new forestation should be done in 5 years. And those owners, we are trying to help them not only in funding, but alleviating their financial administrative burden as well. Next question, Mr. Zahn.
Low social status of farmers in Europe due to low food prices and their independence is not possible because of subsidies.
Thank you. Yes, of course. The direct payments are a part of a strategy which was created after the Second World War to defend low food prices in Europe, and it changed in the 70s and 80s and ongoing decades to a more product-independent political strategy to support agriculture, to support rural developments, the Salzburg and so on. If you look to your reality on your farms, then you come very often in a situation that you blame about the impact of these subsidies. Others get more, and it's unfair and whatever. If you look to global level, then you see that this is a central political instrument to defend small and medium-sized enterprises. And if you look to other countries where we are in a direct competing situation on production level, then you can see that the unfairness of subsidies is existing all over the world, but not with the aim of being unfair against others. It is more to create more possibilities and solutions for national farmers. The country with the highest subvention quota is in Europe. It's Norway. Nobody knows about it. Second country is Southern Korea, and something like this. That means the level of subsidies gets more possibilities for you. You can use all this money only once in your history. Use it or leave it. If you leave it, you lost a chance. If you use it, you can really create a better solution and a better standing for your farm and on today and also for future. Thank you.
Ďakujeme. Ďalšia otázka je na pana Šíra.
Next question for Mr. Scheer. Is there any relation between our accession to the EU in 2004 and substantial drop in meat and other commodities since 2004? Well, thank you for the question. And I must say that statistics are quite clear. Especially in pork and poultry section, there was substantial reduction. And in pork, before we accessed to the EU, we were self-sufficient around 100 30%. Today it's 50%. And in meeting MPs of the European Parliament, I'm stating these figures so that they would realize what we are after. We cannot give up the ambition to have a reasonable level of self-sustainability. In terms of beef, we are relatively well off, not well in pork. Poultry had dropped as well. So I must say, yes, the accession to the EU has meant a strong competition from other countries with long-term agriculture, long-term subsidized by states. So the competition is very unpleasant, and today we are in a situation when our farmers have top results from the viewpoint of effectiveness. Our farmers are able to cope with competition from Western countries, but on the other hand, we have chains and stores, and they are deciding what to sell and at what prices. This is not related to CAP. It's a bit of different field of the European situation, but I believe that even at this situation we'll adopt steps. Individual figures are well known, and, well, in terms of cattle, in the past 15-20 years, we got from 3,900 liters per milk cow to a much better situation, and we more than doubled the production from one dairy cow per year, and that was reflected in a drop of numbers of dairy cows. However, we cannot go back to the original situation because the effectiveness raised dramatically. Next question for Mr. Toman. How to prevent exporting foodstuffs from countries where they are not in line with safety and quality standards. In terms of low-quality foodstuffs, I can charge the State Commission of Supervision to supervise the quality because we are part of the EU. But I do not want to let to our market just any foodstuffs. It depends on what individual chains will order, and we cannot compete with dumping prices. We want to compete with the quality, and if you look at things sold in the Czech Republic, the customer is simply buying what the chains are offering. I'm sure that chains should support Czech foodstuffs, Czech producers, and I'm sure that at the minimum 2/3 of foodstuffs should be local. I'm speaking about foodstuffs which we could produce by ourselves. Let me mention the example of garlic, because we are quite sustainable in garlic, but we are importing it. And in terms of increasing number of pigs, well, we all know the situation. We will try to promote Czech production of Czech Moravian, a Silesian foodstuffs. We have Klasa trademark, and we are communicating with the European Commission to let us to brand Czech foodstuffs by a specific Czech brand related to the Czech standards. And I believe that we will have to evolve pressure on chains, and we need to supervise agreements on foodstuffs exported from third countries. So we need to defend ourselves, and we need to insist that from third countries only such foodstuffs could be exported that are in line with our own standards. Thank you. Next question, Mr. Dolezal. In case that you will be elected the president of the Agrarian Chamber, will you continue in the footsteps of your predecessor, Mr. Jandisek, or do you have your own concept? Well, it's a simple question with a simple answer. Nevertheless, I believe that there are no simple answers in an objective way. People are different. We are from different generations. I'm more a team player, but I'm not that experienced as a current president who is well experienced and he could look into the past, utilizing his experience. I'm lacking this advantage, but if I'm elected, it's still far away, it's in March, I'm going to use my experience which I've gathered in my function of the Secretary of the Agrarian Chamber, experience from Brussels, etc. And I'll follow up on what a good Agrarian Chamber had done well in the past 3 years. And I'm going to improve our activities so that we provided the best possible services to our members.
Ivana Davida.
Thank you. Next question is directed to Mr. David. What proposals are there in the European Union to support national production and consumption? And what are the obstacles? I believe we need to stress that the members of the European Parliament do not have the legislative initiative. That comes from the European Commission and from the ministers. But we can do something with what the European Parliament is supplied with. As for the support of local consumption, this is related, willingly or unwillingly, to the proposals for the ceilings, which offers advantage to larger establishments, which can then market their produce more or less independently of the site of their activity. And then there's the other limitation, which, on the contrary, will result in further localization of the sale. And that has to do with fuels and fuel prices. That can limit transportation of produce to greater distances. The large farms are in a better position to communicate with the retailers in the area. I believe there are some prospects for the future for the smaller establishments, whose advantage can be the more intimate knowledge of the local area. There are such discussions, there are such proposals from the field to the fork, as we know, but I haven't registered any major efforts. Thank you. The next question is directed to Professor Smutka. How do you think young, educated people can be attracted to work in farming? Thank you for the question. It's quite an interesting one. Nevertheless, I think we should mainly talk about the attractiveness of agriculture. At present, many people regard agriculture as something which is almost outside the scope of their view. The share of agriculture in GDP is somewhere between 2 and 3%, and that's where the knowledge of most people ends. And institutions of higher education, which should train people for work in agriculture, tend to succumb to the general perception. So we have lots of experts at the agricultural college focusing on pets or such matters rather than crop production or animal husbandry. So we should promote the potential of agriculture, also in terms of the growing demand for quality products. We should stress the technological development and innovation in the sector that can inspire interest in the sector among the younger population. The externalities generated in agriculture are huge, and we should keep mentioning it, keep reminding of it. In this kind of system, agriculture has a key role. Next question is directed to Mr. Spahn. What is your idea of the import of GMO commodities at a time when the European Union is trying to prohibit it?
I think first, GMO for me is only a kind of production method. It's not a thing where you can say it's good, it's bad, or whatever. It's a technology, and you can use it or not. But who decides about if you use it or not? It's the consumers, again. It's the people who buy your products. And if they want to buy GMO-free products, then you produce them for this market, for these consumers. If you look to questions of international relations, like import and export, the question is what kind of products you want to export in future. If you look to the big export markets, then you see that you can easily export to these countries if the consumers in these countries believe that your products are from high quality, that they trust you and your products, that they feel safe with the consumption of these products. If you look to child food in China or whatever, you see that people are paying a very high price because they believe that these products are safe for the children. And that's the same with this question. So you can bring it on the level of a political question, which is far away from the markets. And then they can say, yes, it disturbs me, it's a burden, and we have to open and give everyone the chance to use GMO and whatever. But if you are defending the idea of a high quality product, a safe product, for export markets and your own consumption, you have to find a general agreement about using of GMOs or not. Today, Europe decided very clear to be against this production method, and they are also against the import of GMO products, feedstuff and so on from Latin America, and that the rest is ideology. The rest is ideology, and you can fight for change in Europe. Maybe you win, or you fight for protecting Europe against this production method. But that will be a decision of politicians. They decide who wins and who loses, and who are the winners and the losers. And also in this case, again, if you are competing against producers who work with GMO methods, it needs a lot of investments to compete against them if you go in this market. If you say, my products are an alternative, then you don't need these high investments. And if you are rich enough to compete against these producers with their instruments and with their weapons, then go this way, or try to go this way. But first you have to give yourself a lot of answers.
Thank you. A posledná otázka je smerovaná na pána Davida. Aký dojem má...
Thank you. The last question is directed to Mr. David. What is your impression of your several months in the European Parliament, especially as member of the Agricultural Committee? I would like to say, generally, I have three motives. One of them, some kind of ideology. The second is to try to take rational decisions for someone you represent. And the third aspect is corruption. The boundaries between ideological and rationalistic decision-making, or the boundaries with corruption are sometimes blurred and difficult to tell, but these three aspects always play a role. The European Parliament, as I mentioned, does not have a legislative initiative, and it is generally thought that it is positive to fight for something good, but I would say it is equally positive to prevent something negative, which I think we have been successful in curbing certain things we do not wish for. Three Czech MEPs sit on the Agriculture and Rural Development Committee, but not even the three of us can clearly agree on what is good for the Czech Republic. For example, in relation to Mercosur, to decide whether we should offer an advantage to some industrial companies, whether we should try to improve conditions for the export of Czech products at the cost of making it more difficult for our agriculture, also taking into account the climatic effects. We have, for example, managed to reduce the import of GMO soya. You may take it as something unimportant, but this was a step toward making it more difficult for the exporters of such products. as has been mentioned, it is important to take a unified approach, but this doesn't make very much sense. As Mr. Spans suggests, some of the genetic modifications could reduce the quality, while others would be more resistant to herbicides, which could lead to greater consumption of herbicides, and that would be adverse effects. We have managed to prevent the prolongation of the authorization of glyphosate. So breaking things, or say slowing things down, can be of positive effect, but our success has been limited. I would like, because this has been the last question, I would like to thank all those who have taken part in this discussion, in the answering of these questions. We are going to hear more interesting questions. The fact that they are scheduled for this afternoon doesn't mean they are not as important as those we have heard. So at this point, let me wish you good appetite for your lunch. And we have succeeded in one thing which could hardly be have been wished for, and that is we've kept within our time schedule. So let me thank all the speakers, and at this point I would like to invite you to lunch and also to the lecture room for the press conference. We